I'm Carrie Dara with Grow Cedar Valley, and welcome to our Grow Cedar Valley Facebook Live webinar. Today we are working with our area leaders, and the topic of our conversation today will be creative business solutions during the COVID-19 crisis. So we know we have many of our viewers who either work at or own a small business in the area, and we know we have good information that we can share with you that can help you kind of weather through some of what's going on and what may be coming yet. So with me today, I have Paul Kinghorn, who's the director of the Center for Business Growth and Innovation at the University of Northern Iowa. We have Beenken, who oversees the Advanced Iowa Project. And then we also have Amy Duntton joining us today. She's the regional director for the Small Business Development Center. I think I'll start with you, Paul, a few minutes just to, you know what the topic is, if you want to share some of what your observations, some of your conversations have been, and how you've been able to assist our businesses.
Sure, Carrie, thanks for inviting us to come and share our perspective and get a little bit of a take on what we're seeing going on out there and some of the great stories and examples that people are rising to the occasion and ways in which we recognize people still are looking for some guidance and some assistance. So our programs here at the University of Northern Iowa and our center is specifically targeted to help these small businesses who are experiencing disruption. Maybe that's an understatement, but ways in which they can help improve their operation. So early on, we saw people were kind of in the disbelief mode. You know, they weren't sure what was going to happen, you know, how it was going to impact them. And as we slowly went from, you know, the elevated nature of the crisis to where things were getting shut down, then it went from that disbelief to the shock of it all. And then in some cases, throwing up their hands, this is going to disrupt and ruin my business. Then we got to a kind of an interesting part, which was kind of exciting, where people started to recognize that they could do some things differently, right? Didn't mean business as usual. So if you're in the restaurant business, you had to change and alter the way in which you provided services to your customers, the carry out, the curbside, in some cases minimizing your menu offering to be more adaptive to that client. If you're in other service businesses, retail businesses, you had to get creative in terms of how you reached out to your customers. We, seeing these trends going on in the mind of the client, in our case, the small business owners, recognize that they needed to get some resources, information about their operation, either how they operated, how they existed, how they could navigate through these times. And so we created a series of webinars that we did ourselves to help connect them with professionals, topical areas that addressed anywhere from pragmatic things like the various funding and assistance programs, all the way through to trying to make sure that they were keeping their own and their employees' mental health at bay and trying to do the things that could help them prepare to get through this during the current situation, but also prepare better for the future when hopefully things will return back to whatever normalcy looks like.
Very good, very good. So you mentioned the webinars that you've been working on with your team, pushing out from your center. Dan, I believe you've been in, at least some of that I've seen, you've been leading. Would you want to share some of what that information has been and the response and the impact that you believe it's been having?
Sure, absolutely. In fact, I just got off one 6 minutes ago.
Well, thanks for joining us.
Yeah. We were focused on OSHA and making sure people have what wasn't in my vocabulary before today, but is now, is a pandemic response plan. And employers of size need to have that in place, talking about how they are checking employees on their way in, doing self-checks, doing temp checks, etc. I'm not going to get into a lot of it, but you can check that one out on our archive. And we've covered a lot of other things over the last couple of weeks. My colleague to my right here is Amy Duntton, who's been helping out a lot with some of the stimulus programs that have come out and actually walking people through specifically how to fill those out, what kind of information is needed. I think what we're trying to remember from our shoes is that being a business owner is stressful to begin with. Now we've got COVID, which just makes it amplified to an nth degree. And these programs that have come out while the applications are not incredibly complex, anything right now adds stress to somebody's life. And so we're just trying to be able to be as there for them as possible, make it as easy as possible to help people through that. I know we get calls daily, obviously, asking for help with these applications. They've changed the rules and structures on these things. Some programs have already closed. I got a text alert that the PPP program is already at a capacity of funding, at least for the first round. Will there be a second round? I don't know. But anyway, that's kind of the situation with our webinars, is just trying to alleviate stress, provide correct information timely. So thanks, Carrie.
Sure, very good. So Amy, we've had a chance to visit a little for a couple minutes before everybody else got on, and you had some really good insight about some of the things that our business owners and our businesses may need to be thinking about differently. But before that, I think you have an update or two that you wanted to share that just came through this morning. May or may not be good news, but it's still current information that needs to be shared. So go ahead.
Right. Dan stole a little of my thunder. He got a little of the scoop there. That's okay. But we did hear this morning that the economic injury disaster loan, that particular fund, you may hear it called EIDL, is currently not accepting additional applications because they have also lapsed funding. So there was a certain amount of money that was put aside for these programs, and they've butted up to that based on the applications received. Also on that program, I do want to note, if anybody that's listening or watching live or recorded applied for the EIDL loan very early in the process and either has no confirmation number or a confirmation number that starts with 2, they are to reapply through the portal. Now, we got both of these messages kind of at the same time, this reapply message and the lapsed funding. So I haven't gotten clarification from the SBA, but their first message did indicate that those loan requests that need to be reapplied, their place in line was held. So I'm guessing it's a technology thing. They changed their system midstream due to the size of this disaster and the number of requests they were getting. So if you are one of those folks with no confirmation or confirmation with 2, go out to the SBA.gov website and get into the system and find out what you need to do. You can reach out to the SBDC in your area as well, of course. And we're here in the Cedar Valley. And then, as Dan mentioned, and I have not heard it from the SBA, but have heard from many news sources that the funding is anticipated to have run out either last night or today on the PPP. And when I say run out, that just means they've met the cap that was provided by our federal government. So in conversations I've been part of this week, we've had representatives from other legislators' office who have indicated that they're continuing to work to get an additional $250 billion pumped into that program. So let's just call it a pause and not an end for now, because we don't know. But those programs are kind of on pause for the moment while they figure out the next stream of funding on those. So yeah, you're right. The program through the state, which many people are familiar with, the Economic Development Grant Program also, they closed their applications on March 31st, have done 4 rounds of awards. Those were all posted over the weekend and are out there to be seen. And again, another case of where there might be money coming into that pipeline. But again, no for sure at this point. But I can say with great confidence, there's lots of folks working really hard, local, regional, state, federal levels, to make sure our small businesses are being heard and getting what they need.
So we know that these federal and state financial resources are very, very important as far as helping bridge the gap, or like you said, put your finger in the dike and kind of stop the bleed. But beyond the financial pieces that have already been distributed, and there may be more, there are other creative solutions that our small businesses need to be considering. And like we talked earlier about being open-minded to think about, and any of you can chime in, but Amy, you had some good thoughts that you shared with me. If you would go ahead and share that with the group.
Sure. A lot of my time, typically when we are not in an emergency kind of mode, I'm usually talking to folks who are starting a business. And so they're coming at this with fresh eyes. Maybe they think they know a solution that they think the marketplace needs. And often the conversation I have with them is that they need to get out and talk to consumers. And Paul and Dan are both real familiar with this. We talk about it in Venture School and some of our other programming. But we talk about that customer discovery. You need to be talking to your customers and finding out what they want, what they need. Well, for our existing businesses, what the customer wanted and needed when the business opened pre-COVID may not look exactly the same as what customers want and need today. So if there's a way that our small businesses can be putting their ear to the ground, and right now I think it's through all this great stuff we're doing with social media and interactive video, and even just dialogue, conversation. It might not be face to face, but when your customer calls in to place an order, talk with them, find out where they're at. Being clued into what's happening so that you can really adjust and perhaps alter your business model or your value proposition, what you're offering the consumer to really meet their changing and evolving desires and needs as we go forward. And I think that's really hard because, as Dan said, just being a business owner is so stressful in normal times. You've got all these balls in the air, you're trying to keep everything going, that right now it's super hard to not only be thinking about how am I going to pay the bills and do all these things, but we have to look forward. And what I said to Carrie earlier was, I can't think of another behavior shift that is so massive as the introduction of the automobile. That was a thing that changed the way everybody behaved across the country. I'm hoping that COVID procedures are not permanent, but it significantly will change the way we do business going forward.
That's a very interesting analogy about, as you said, you typically work with small businesses that are ready or wanting to open a business. But as you know, as we all know, putting together that marketing plan, you do a considerable amount of research before you ever, dip your toe in the water to get this done. But so going back to doing that research again with an already established business probably isn't anything anybody anticipated ever. So this is a very eye-opening process to be considered. How about you, Paul? Dan, anything you want to chime in with?
Yeah, so obviously, when we're dealing with disruption and crisis, it means we have to do things slightly differently, and not just do things differently for different sake, but find out where that nexus between the market need and opportunity is, and then taking advantage of it, which is hard for some businesses because their whole operation, the way they deal with customers, the way they operate, they've been putting in place for, in some cases, decades, and having them have to change some of that to adapt is a difficult skill. The other thing, and I'd like to, Dan, to kind of chime in, because one of our webinars that we had done address this. So it's not just dealing with clients differently, customers, and the revenue side of it. It's also operational. How do we change our operational procedures and expenses to adapt to? We had one customer or one client that we worked with that had to look at how they staffed their various shifts of operation to accommodate the workforce, because so many of their staff were now dealing with children being home and having to deal with childcare issues. Dan, do you want to elaborate a little bit on some of the lessons that they shared with us in that respect?
Yeah, absolutely. As a local manufacturer, and we've heard from other local manufacturers as well since then, and talked with others, but they're maybe what was once traditionally a one shift operation has now gone to a second, third shift if they can, if possible, to spread bodies out across multiple time frames. They're incurring costs for doing more hygiene and logistical costs, but that's all far better than seeing an outbreak come to your company door because folks are too close together, too many of them in the doors at one time. And so that's been a big one that I've seen is the shifting of shifts, so to speak, allowing more folks to work from home. That's not traditionally been done a lot in some of those manufacturing environments, especially. But with the new realities, we've seen that as well. I know some owners are uneasy about it a little bit, but it seems like it's another risk-reward benefit that just has to be in play right now.
I think that's one thing that we're realizing as we, before we even knew this crisis was coming, we were working on how do we retain and recruit talent, and looking at unique different operational activities that could either retain or attract talent. these may be some of the things that will stick after we're back to a work environment that's more manageable. I don't know that it'll ever be normal, or as everyone says, the new normal, but it would make sense that adopting some of these practices that we're finding could be successful, may be helping us down the road when we need to readdress our talent and workforce attraction and retention. Paul?
So that's exactly what we're finding. In fact, even internally with our own center, there are services that we offered in person that we assumed had to be offered in person because of the benefit that comes from being in the group. We found that through these platforms online like Zoom and others, that some of what we assumed had to operate a certain way is not the case at all. And so with that newfound awareness, and now that people are more familiar with this as a vehicle to communicate, we anticipate being able to bring some of those services to a broader audience across the state. So for instance, we host a series of peer groups where business owners come together and in a very structured way and share concerns and issues and help process them together in a group. So now we can do those peer groups virtually online, still get the same benefit of interaction that's managed. So to that effect, we've been able to kind of have that awareness. Now, think of all the businesses that are out there that are now being able to virtually communicate with their customers, do product launches, do demonstrations. And this stuff isn't new. These tools have been around for decades. What is new is the procedures and processes that we're now developing and putting in place to be able to handle that communication and do it in a way that still gets the results that we're hoping for. So whoever, as they're going through, these challenging times, as you're making these changes, adaptations, some cases for survival purposes, document and identify what worked well, what didn't work well. And when you get through to where we start to get some sense of normalcy again, now we can start to look at those procedures as maybe that's the new opportunity for us going forward that we can take advantage of, where we thought we were in a stuck position before, uncertain of how to go move forward.
Right. Well, and as you said, people are forced to be making these kinds of virtual and technology leaps that they may not have been confident about before or comfortable with. And now the comfort has been forced on you. So you coming out of this, you will be more adapt to embracing some of this than you might have thought you would have before. So.
And keep in mind too, that your competitors are also getting these skills. So in some cases where it was a competitive advantage, maybe a few months ago, now it's going to be almost the expectation that you provide these services to certain customers, which gets to Amy's point, which is understand what the customer needs. Not everyone's going to want to do business this way or want to interact this way, but there are going to be some that find that this is very convenient, very comfortable. And if you don't have that offering, so pretty soon you're going to find that you are at a competitive disadvantage.
Yeah, good observation. Thank you. Go ahead, Amy.
What Paul just was talking about, that idea that people might adopt the new normal, I think is really important to touch on. So don't assume that when this is over, whatever that looks like, that people will go back to old behaviors.
Right.
Psychologists probably have a name for it, but there is, there is documented proof that people adopt new behaviors and they learn real quickly that they're going to drop the stuff that doesn't serve them.
Very good.
Didn't miss getting my hair colored for 6 weeks. I go back.
Yep. Interesting.
What is the consumer what's their change gonna be?
Right. Very good. Do you have any other parting thoughts, any last thoughts? I do want one of you to share with the group how to take advantage of the webinars that you're producing out of your center, so that others can get on. And while I know all three of you have been saying a lot of what you shared with us today in other venues, those who are close to me have heard me say this before, but people learn and absorb information differently, different times, depending on when it's relevant for them. So thank you for sharing your thoughts, your observations, and actually the direction that people can be optimistic about going. So that's very, very important. But go ahead. Anybody have any last thoughts they want to share? Or how to get on your webinars?
I was just going to add, I think it's important to be able to meet customers where they are right now. And be flexible to that. Our webinars are on our website, which is cbgi.uni.edu. or advanceiowa.com. We have a couple more coming up next week. We're going to be more focused on helping what I would call traditional bricks and mortar retailers. How do they adapt to a virtual world? There's some great, oh shoot, I'm sorry. There's some great, that was a bad dog bomb there. There's some great examples out there of folks, from gyms that are doing online communities. I've seen where, thinking about these families, they've got kids at home now, and my
Dogs.
kids and my dog are driving me nuts. Some of these health clubs are offering kids exercise classes, I've seen.
Yep.
And retailers doing Facebook Live sessions and things like that. So we're going to start doing more features on how to kind of be creative with your business model.
Very good. Well, I want to thank you again, the three of you, for joining us today, and all of you that are viewing our webinar. This is our second one, and they've been very well received. And the first two, next week, we'll be doing this every Tuesday and Thursday morning at 10:30. And we planned it at 10:30 to be just prior to when the governor addresses the state. So for those of you who are interested in seeing the governor's message, it's usually at 11, if there's not a delay, on the Governor Reynolds website, Facebook page. But next Tuesday, we'll have our next Grow Cedar Valley Facebook Live with representatives from financial institutions. So it'll be interesting to see their thoughts and their perspective, especially with the changes that Amy or the updates that Amy just shared with us. There probably will be more before next Tuesday, so we'll get the latest from that too. So once again, thank you. And thank you all for joining us, and let us know if there are any questions at all. Our resource page on growcedarvalley.com will have the updated information that Amy just shared, as well as other resources that you need to be aware of working through this crisis. Thank you.
Thank you, Carrie. Thanks for doing these.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Thanks.
Thanks, guys. That was good. Appreciate it.
You're welcome. Good to see you
Thank you.
guys.
Thank you guys. It went
Good luck.
great. Just to let you know,